One lazy afternoon, in the residence of Reeds, there lived a young orphan who was unfortunately raised by her cruel aunt. There was no possibility of taking a walk that day, and Jane was glad of it. Dreadful to the cold winter wind and nipped fingers, her aunt Mary Reed lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside with her darlings about her, while there's Jane, whom she had dispensed from joining the group.
Aunt? What am I said to have done?
Jane, I don't like cavaliers or questioners. Be seated somewhere and remain silent.
Okay, Aunt. You can call me any time of your favor. I'll be around the house.
I know, Jane, and I said to be seated and remain silent. Can't you see I'm busy resting here? This child has no respect at all.
Jane left with a loud sigh. A breakfast room adjoined the drawing room. Jane slipped in there, carefully taking of what should be arranged inside. She mounted into the window seat, gathering up her feet and drawing the red moreen curtain nearly closed, then took care of Bewick's History of British Birds book. She stood there silently when the bitchy aunt came shouting.
Where is she? Where is Jane?
What do you want?
Huh? What did you say? It's what do you want, Mistress Reed?
What do you want, Mrs. Reed?
I want you to come here, you animal.
Jane approached Mrs. Reed, frightened and obedient.
You have no business to take our books. You have no money. Your father left you none. You ought to beg, and not to leave her with gentlemen's children. Now I'll teach you some lessons.
What did I do? I did nothing but served you. You were like a murderer. You were like a slave driver. You were like the Roman emperors.
Jane had read Goldsmith's History of Rome and had formed her opinion of Nero, Caligula, and etc. Also, she had drawn parallels.
Take her away to the Red Room and lock her in there.
In full of despair, Jane was brutally taken away. Inside the Red Room, she cried all her heart out, asking what did she do to receive this hard-hearted treatment.
Unjust, unjust. In this chamber my Uncle Reed breathed his last. Here he lay in state. Will I be cold dead in this as him?
Jane could not remember him, but she knew that he had taken her, a parentless infant, to his house, and that, in his last moments, he had required a promise of Mrs. Reed, that she would rear Jane as one of her own.
I recall now what I heard of the dead men, troubled in their graves by the violation of their last wishes, revisiting the earth to punish the perjured and avenge the oppressed. Mr. Reed's spirit.
You are afraid of ghosts?
Of Mr. Reed's ghost, I am. Who are you?
Jane begins to panic upon hearing the unknown. Not knowing what to do, she gasped for air and fainted. November, December, and half of January passed away so fast. For nearly 3 months, she had never been called to Mrs. Reed's presence. She fell to breathing on the frost flowers with which the window was fretted. From this vantage, she saw the lights and gates thrown open.
Your name, little girl?
Jane Eyre, sir.
Well, Jane Eyre, are you a good child?
Perhaps the less said on that subject the better, Mr. Brocklehurst.
Do you know where the wicked go after death?
They go to hell.
And what must you do to avoid that pit?
I must keep in good health and not die.
Not the answer he was looking for, perhaps.
Jane, sit down. Mr. Brocklehurst, this little girl has not quite the character and disposition I could wish. Should you admit her into the Lowood School, and I should be glad if the teachers were requested to keep a strict eye on her and to guard against her worst fault, a tendency to deceit.
All liars will have their prison in the lake burning with fire and brimstone.
Jane saw herself transformed under the stranger's eye into an artful, nauseous child.
I should wish her to be brought up in a manner suiting her prospects, to be made useful and keep humble. As for the vacations, she will, with your permission, spend them always at Lowood.
Your decisions are perfectly judicious, madam.
Go out of the room. Return to the nursery.
Jane turns to go, but turns back.
I am not deceitful. If I were, I should say I loved you, but I declare I do not love you. I dislike you the worst of anybody in the world. I will never call you aunt again as long as I lived. I will never come to see you when I am grown up. And anyone asks me how I liked you and how you treated me, I will say the very thought of you makes me sick. People think you're a good woman, but you are bad, hard-hearted. You are deceitful.
Mrs. Reed leaves abruptly, handing Jane her travel bag. Jane smiles and takes Mrs. Reed's seat. Even for Jane, life still has its gleams of sunshine. In the Lowood institution.
Burns, come forward and bring the rod. Burns, you poke your chin most unpleasantly. Draw it in. Burns, I insist on your holding your head up. I will not have you before me in that attitude. Burns, you dirty, disagreeable girl. Step down from the stool. You'll wear the untidy badge today. Where's Jane Eyre?
Sir?
Naughty girl. Stand up on the stool at once. Teachers and children, you'll see this girl who would think that the evil one had already found a servant and agent in here. You must be on your guard against her. You must shun her example, avoid her company, and exclude her from your sports. This girl, this child, the native of a Christian land, is a liar.
Come, eat something.
What is your name beside Burns?
Helen.
Helen. Why do you stay with a girl whom everybody believes to be a liar?
Huh? Everybody? Jane? Why? There are only 80 people who have heard you called so, and the world contains hundreds of millions.
But what have I to do with millions? The 80, I know, despise me.
Jane, you are mistaken. Probably not one in the school either despises or dislikes you. Many, I am sure, pity you much.
How can they pity me after what Mr. Brocklehurst has said?
Mr. Brocklehurst is not a god, nor is he even a great and admired man. He is little liked here.
You must wish to live Lowood.
No, why should I? I was sent to Lowood to get an education, and it will be of no use going away until I have attained that subject.
But that teacher is so cruel to you.
Cruel? Not at all. He is severe and dislikes my fault.
And if I were in your place, I should dislike him. I should resist him. If he struck me with that rod, I should get it from his hand. I should break it under his nose.
If you did, Mr. Brocklehurst would expel you from school.
But I feel this, Helen. I must dislike those who, whatever I do to please them, persist in disliking me. I must resist those who punish me unjustly. It is as natural as that I should love those who show me affection.
Though Jane is a defective being, yet she never tired of Helen Burns. She still cherished for her an attachment as strong, tender, and respectful as any that ever animated her heart. Spring drew on. Flowers peeped out amongst the leaves, snowdrops, crocuses, purple auriculas, and golden-eyed pansies. April advanced to May. Days of blue sky, placid sunshine, and soft southern gales filled up its duration. Lowood shook loose its tresses and became all green, all flowery.
These fragrant treasures were all useless for most of the inmates of the wood, except to furnish a handful of blossoms to put in a coffin. This forest dell, where Lowood lays, is a cradle of fog and pestilence, which has breath typhus through our crowded schoolroom, transforming the seminary into an hospital.
"45 out of the 80 girls lay ill at one time. Many, already smitten, went home only to die. Some died at the school and were buried quietly and quickly. But Helen was ill at present, removed to a room upstairs."
How sad to be lying now on a sick bed, in danger of dying. This world is pleasant. It would be dreary to be called from it and have to go. Who knows where?
Worried, Jane goes to Helen. She saw her laying in bed with a white sheet.
I came to see you, Helen. I could not sleep till I had spoken to you.
You came to bid me goodbye. Then you were just in time, probably.
No, Helen.
Jane, you look cold. Lie down and cover yourself with my quilt.
Helen puts her arm over Jane, and they nestle close.
How comfortable I am. I feel as if I could sleep. But don't leave me, Jane. I like to have you near me.
I'll stay with you, dear Helen. No one shall take me away from you.
Good night, Jane.
Good night, Helen.
A few moments, Helen dies and is covered with a sheet. Jane stands by her grave as if she's in a misery.
Her grave is in Brocklebridge churchyard. For 15 years after her death, it was only covered by a grassy mound, but now a grey marble tablet marks the spot, inscribed with her name and the word Resurgam.
I loved you, Helen Burns. Resurgam. We are mourning Helen now, Belle, not your sister.
Jane passes a space of 8 years almost in silence. During these 8 years, her life was uniform. She rose to be the first girl in the first class, then she was made a teacher, and now she is tired of the routine in one afternoon. She felt that it was not enough. She desired liberty, but it seemed a dream swept off into vague space. Then she thought she should be granted at least a new servitude.
A new servitude. There's something in that.
It is of no use wanting anything better.
How do people do to get a new place? I must advertise.
With the earliest day, she was up.
A young lady accustomed to tuition, hadn't been a teacher for 2 years, is desirous of meeting with the situation in a private family where the children are under 14.
She was barely 18 after all.
She is qualified to teach the usual branches of a good English education, together with French, drawing, and music.
She had her advertisement written, enclosed, and directed before the bell rang to rouse the school. Within a week, Jane receives an offer from one Mrs. Fairfax at Thornfield Hall, near Millcote. The roads were heavy, the night misty. Jane's carriage slowly ascended a drive and came upon the long front of a house. It was 3 stories high, of proportion not vast, though considerable, a gentleman's manor house.
Mrs. Fairfax, I suppose.
There's a brief comedy of errors and mistaken identities, where Jane assumes that Mrs. Fairfax is the mistress of this mansion. Mistress is a fun word. In this case, I mean a woman who has power, authority, or ownership, such as the female head of a household. But as with most words for a woman, it will later come to mean the near opposite, a woman who is courted or kept by a married man. Soon to be an apt description of Jane, though she doesn't know it. Spoiler alert, Mrs. Fairfax is the housekeeper and mostly slows down the action.
Follow me.
A very chill and vault-like air pervaded the stairs and gallery, suggesting cheerless ideas of space and solitude. One would almost say that if there were a ghost at Thornfield Hall, this would be its haunt.
So you have no ghost?
None. I'm certain of it.
Mrs. Fairfax, did you hear that?
Some of the servants, likely perhaps Grace Poole. She sews in one of these rooms.
October, November, December passed away. Jane not unfrequently heard Grace Pole's laugh. Sometimes she saw her. She would come out of her room with a plate in her hand and go down to the kitchen and shortly return, bearing a pot of porter. Hard feature and staid, she had no point to which interest could attach. One afternoon, January, Mrs. Fairfax had written a letter which was waiting to be posted. So Jane put on her bonnet and cloak and volunteered to carry it to Hay. For her, distance 2 miles would be a pleasant winter afternoon walk.
What the deuce is to do now?
Are you injured, sir? Can I do anything?
You must just stand on one side.
If you're hurt and want help, sir.
Thank you. I shall do. I have no broken bones. Only a sprain.
I cannot think of leaving you, sir, at so late an hour.
You ought to be at home yourself. Where do you come from?
From just below, and I am not all afraid of being out late when it's moonlight.
Do you mean at that house with the battlements?
Yes, sir.
Whose house is it?
Mr. Rochester's.
Do you know Mr. Rochester?
No, I have never seen him.
You are not the servant at the hall, of course. You are?
I am the governess.
Ah, the governess. Jews take me. If I had not forgotten, the governess, if you will be so kind.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now make a haste.
The incident had occurred and was gone for her. Yet, she was pleased to have done something. Trivial as the deed was, it was yet an active thing. Re-entering Thornfield was a return to stagnation.
What the deuce is it to me whether Miss Eyre be there or not? Let her be seated.
A reception of finished politeness would probably have confused her, but harsh caprice gave her the advantage.
You have been resident in my house for 3 months?
Yes, sir.
And you came from?
From the wood school.
Ah, a charitable concern. No wonder you have rather the look of another world. You have lived the life of a nun. Well, what did you learn at Lowood? Adele showed me some sketches this morning, which she said were yours. Probably a master aided you.
No, indeed.
Ah, that breaks pride. Well, fetch me your portfolio. If you can vouch for its contents being original, I can recognize patchwork.
Then I will say nothing, and you shall judge for yourself, sir. While he is so occupied, I will tell you, reader, what they are, and first, I must premise that they are nothing wonderful.
The drawings are, for a schoolgirl, peculiar, elfish. Where do you get your copies?
Out of my head.
Has it other furniture of the same kind within?
I should think it may have. I should hope better.
You examine me, Miss Eyre. Do you think I'm handsome?
No, sir.
Ah, by my word. Go on. What fault do you find within me?
Mr. Rochester, allow me to disown my first answer. It was only a blunder.
Miss Eyre, the fact is, I don't wish to treat you like an inferior that is. I claim only such superiority as must result from 20 years difference in age and a century's advance in experience.
I don't think, sir, you have a right to command me merely because you're older than I, or because you have seen more of the world than I have.
Hump. Living superiority out of the questions then. You must still agree to receive my orders now and then, without being hurt by the tone of command. Will you? That smile is very well, but speaks to.
Very few masters would trouble themselves to inquire whether or not their paid subordinates were hurt by their orders.
Paid subordinates. Oh yes, I had forgotten the salary. Well then, on that misery ground, will you agree to let me hector a little?
No, sir, not on the ground, but on the ground that you did forget it. I agree heartily.
Where are you going?
To put Adele to bed, it is past her bedtime.
You are afraid of me? Because I talk like a sphinx?
Your language is enigmatical, sir, but I am certainly not afraid.
Never mind. But, wait a minute. Adele is not ready to go to bed yet.
He then told her that Adele was the daughter of a French opera singer, Céline Varens, towards whom he had once cherished what he called a grand passion.
I am not her father, but hearing that she was quite destitute, I took the poor flower out of Paris and transplanted it here. But now you know that she is the illegitimate child of a French opera girl. You will perhaps think differently of her.
How could I possibly prefer the spoiled pet to a lonely little orphan? And was Mr. Rochester now ugly in my eyes? No, reader. Gratitude and many pleasurable associations made his face the object I best liked to see. Yet I had not forgotten his faults. In my secret soul, I knew that his great kindness to me was balanced by unjust severity to many others.
On the next day, Jane was alone in her room.
Who is there? Was that Graceful? Is she possessed by a devil?
Jane then realized that fire broke out. She hurriedly ran towards Mr. Rochester, who is in deep sleep.
Wake up! Wake up!
She shakes him, but he only murmurs and turns. She rushes to his basin and sewer filled with water, heaving them up and deluging the bed and its occupant, extinguishing the flames.
In the name of all the elves in Christendom, is that Jane Eyre? What have you done with me, witch, sorceress? Have you plotted to drown me?
In heaven's name, get up! Your bed's on fire! Shall I call Mrs. Fairfax?
Mrs. Fairfax? No! What the deuce would you call her for? What can she do? Just be still. There, I am up now. Did you see anything when you opened your chamber door?
No, sir. Only the candlestick on the ground.
But you heard the odd laugh?
Yes, sir. There is a woman who saws here, called Graceful. She laughs in that way.
Just so. Grace Pole. You have guessed it.
The morning passed just as usual, but Grace puzzled over the character of Grace Poole, and why she had not been given into custody that morning. Mr. Rochester had declared his conviction of her criminality just last night. That thought is interrupted when Jane found that Mr. Rochester is gone to the Leas without a goodbye, 10 miles the other side of Millcote, where he is likely to stay a week or more. The ladies there are fond of him.
There are ladies at the Leas? Very elegant young ladies indeed. Blanche and Mary and Crown. Blanche came to a Christmas ball, and she was considered the belle of the evening. What was she like? Tall, fine, bust, sloping shoulders, long, graceful neck, olive complexion, dark and clear, noble features, and then she had such a fine head of hair, the glossiest curls I ever saw. She was greatly admired, yes, and not only for her beauty, but for her accomplishments. She and Mr. Rochester suits each other.
A greater fool than Jane Eyre had never breathed the breath of life.
You, a favorite with Mr. Rochester, and gifted with the power of pleasing him? Poor stupid dupe.
Listen then, Jane Eyre, to your sentence. Place the glass before you and draw in your chalk your own picture, faithfully without softening one defect. Write under it, portrait of a governess, disconnected, poor, and plain.
He said something in praise of your eyes, did he? Blind puppy.
Afterwards, choose your most delicate camel hair pencil. Delineate carefully the loveliest face you can imagine. Paint it in your softest shades and sweetest lines. Recall the august yet harmonious linings, the Grecian neck and bust, and the delicate hand. Call it blanched, an accomplished lady of rank.
Is it likely Mr. Rochester would waste a serious thought on this indigent and insignificant plebeian?
It had been a mild, serene spring day when at last 4 equestrians galloped up the drive. The third was Mr. Rochester on his black horse. At his side rode Miss Ingram.
Look how she leans her head towards him as if she were conversing confidentially.
Blanche Ingram was molded like a dian. She answered point for point, both to my picture and Mrs. Fairfax's description. Coffee was handed, and there was life everywhere, movement all day long. Merry days were these at Thornfield Hall. Miss Ingram, who had now seated herself at the piano, commenced a brilliant prelude, talking meantime. Oh, I am so sick of the young men of the present day, exclaimed she. Poor punny things, not fit to go outside without Mama's permission. She's a real bore if you ask me, but constantly flirting with Mr. Rochester. The party seems to last for days. Jane is instructed to join, but never allowed to participate. Jane saw that he was going to marry her for family, perhaps political reasons, but she was not jealous. Miss Ingram was a mark beneath jealousy, very showy but not genuine. She had a fine person, but her heart was barren. She did not know the sensations of sympathy and pity, tenderness and truth.
I have learned to love Mr. Rochester. I cannot unlove him now, merely because I saw all his attentions appropriated by a great lady who scorned to touch me with the hem of her robes.
It was verging on dusk when a gentleman arrived, a tall, fashionable-looking stranger.
It appears I come at an important time when Mr. Chester is from home, but I arrive from a very long journey, and I think I may install myself here till he returns.
Jane presently gathered that the newcomer was called Mr. Mason, that he was but just arrived in England, and that he came from some hot country. Presently the words Jamaica, Kingston, and Spanish Town indicated the West Indies. Mr. Mason makes himself at home as another stranger arrives, an old woman, quite troublesome, who insists on telling the fortunes of Miss Ingram, who seems shaken by the encounter, and then Jane, who has no interest in fortune tellers.
I'm not silly.
Fortune teller tries to get Jane talking about Mr. Rochester and Miss Ingram, but she'd rather talk about living on her own.
I hope to save money enough out of my earnings to set up a school someday in a little house rented by myself.
Well, and what do you want your fortune told?
I don't care about it, Mother. You may please yourself.
Well, Jane, do you know me?
The fortune teller turns out to be Mr. Rochester. Surprise! But Jane is not impressed, and neither are we. The whole man in dress 15, Rochester. Seriously?
I had better not stay long, sir. It must be near 11 o'clock. Are you aware, Mr. Rochester, that a stranger has arrived here since you left?
A stranger? No. Who can it be?
His name is Mason, sir, and he comes from the West Indies, I think.
Mason? The West Indies? Tell me, Jane, if all these people came and spat at me, what would you do?
Turn them out of the room, sir, if I could.
My little friend, I wish I were in a quiet island with only you.
Help! Help! Will no one come? Rochester! Rochester! For God's sake, come!
All is right, all is right. A servant has had a nightmare. That is all. Come this way, Jane. Take your time and make no noise. You don't turn sick at the sight of blood. Warm and steady.
She bit me like a tiger's. She said she'd drain my heart.
I warned you, Mason.
Let her be taken care of. Let her be treated as tenderly as may be.
The following day, a servant arrives from Gateshead, dressed in mourning. Jane reached the lodge at the Gateshead about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 1st of May.
Is this Jane Eyre?
Yes, Aunt Reed.
There was something I wish to say. Let me see. Sit up. Don't annoy me. Are you Jen? I have had more trouble with that child than anyone would believe. Such a burden to be left in my hands.
It is I, Aunt Reed.
Well, I must get it over. Eternity is before me. I had better tell her. Read the letter, Jane.
Madame, will you have the goodness to send me the address of my niece, Jane Eyre? Providence has blessed my endeavors to secure a competency. I wish to adopt her during my life and bequeath her at my death whatever I may have to leave. What was written in the letter is this.
It is dated 3 years back. Why did I never hear of this?
Because I disliked you, Jane.
Dear Mrs. Reed, think no more of all this. Let us pass away from your mind. I long earnestly to be reconciled to you now.
Mrs. Reed turns away from her.
Love me then, or hate me as you will. You have my full and free forgiveness.
However, days passed. Mrs. Reed died after the reconciliation. On the other hand, Mr. Rochester had given Jane 1 week's leave of absence. Yet the month elapsed before Jane returned to Thornfield.
Hello. There you are. What the deuce have you done with yourself this last month?
I have been with my aunt, sir, who is dead.
A true Janian reply. She comes from the other world. If I dared, I'd touch you to see if you were a substance or shadow. You elf. Come, you must see the courage, Jane, and tell me if you don't think it will suit Mrs. Rochester exactly, and whether she won't look like Queen Boadicea. I wish Jane and I were a trifle better match with her externally, fairy as you are. Can't you give me the charm to make me a handsome man?
It would be past the power of magic, sir.
Pass, Janet, pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rochester, for your great kindness. Wherever you are is my home, my only home.
Turn back, Jane. So lovely a night, it is a shame to sit in the house. Turnfield is a pleasant place in summer, is it not?
I am attached to it, indeed.
And though I don't comprehend it, you have acquired a degree of regard for that foolish little child Adele, and even for a simple dame, Fairfax.
Yes, sir, in different ways. I have an affection for both.
Pity. It is always the way of events in this life. No sooner have you got settled in a pleasant resting place than a voice calls you to rise and move on. The hour of repose is expired.
Then you're going to be married, sir.
Very soon. That is, Miss Eyre. It was you who first said to me that in case I married Miss Ingram, both you and little Adele had better truth forthwith. I heard of a place that I think will suit. You're like Ireland, I think.
It is a long way off, sir, and then the sea is a barrier.
From what, Jane?
From you, sir.
I shall never see you again, Jane. That is certain. I never go over to Ireland.
I have known you, Mr. Rochester. I have talked face to face with an original, vigorous, expanded mind. I see the necessity of departure, and it strikes me with terror and anguish, like looking on the necessity of death.
Where do you see the necessity?
Where? You, sir, have placed it before me in the shape of Miss Ingram, a noble and a beautiful woman, your bride.
My bride? What bride? I have no bride.
But you will have.
Yes, I will. I will.
Then I must go. You have said it yourself.
No, you must stay.
Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my bread snatched from my lips, and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain and a little, I am soulless and heartless? I am not talking to you now through the medium of costume, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, equal as we are.
Jane, be still. Don't struggle so much like a frantic bird that is rending its own plumage in its desperation.
I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you.
And you shall decide your destiny. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all my possessions.
You play a farce, which I merely laugh at.
I ask you to pass through life at my side, to be my second self and best earthly companion. It is you only, Jane, that I intend to marry.
Your bride, Miss Ingram, stands between us.
My bride is here, because my equal is here. Do you doubt me, Jane?
Do you truly love me?
If an oath is necessary to satisfy you, then I swear it.
Then, sir, I will marry you.
You blushed and now you're white, Jane. What is that for?
Because you gave me a new name, Jane Rochester, and it seems so strange.
Yes, Mrs. Rochester, my girl bride. I will attire my Jane in satin and lace, and she shall have roses in her hair, and I will cover the head I love best with a priceless veil.
And then you will know me, sir, and I shall not be your Jane Eyre any longer, but an ape in a harlequin's jacket.
I shall take you to Malcote, and you must choose some dresses for yourself. We shall sojourn at Paris, Rome, and Naples, Florence, Venice, and Vienna. I shall travel with a very angel, with you, Jane.
I am not an angel, Mr. Rochester. You must not expect anything celestial of me, for you will not get it, any more than I shall get it of you, which I do not at all anticipate.
What do you anticipate of me?
I suppose your love will effervesce in 6 months or less. Yet, after all, my future husband is becoming my entire world.
Before the wedding day, just at sunset, the air turned cold and the sky cloudy. Mr. Fairfax called Jane upstairs to look at her wedding dress, which they had just brought, and under it in the box she found a present. The veil in which in his princely extravagance Mr. Rochester had sent from London. Jane smiled as she unfolded it, and devised how she would tease him about his aristocratic tastes. As it grew dark, the wind rose with a sullen, moaning sound. From some time after she went to bed, she could not sleep.
This was not Mrs. Fairfax. It was not even that strange woman, Grace Poole.
It must have been one of them.
No, sir. The shape reminded me of the foul German spectre, the vampire.
My treasure, nerves like yours were not made for rough handling. Once united, there shall be no recurrence of these mental terrors.
Mental terrors, sir.
Now, the wedding day.
Plunger, my brain is on fire with impatience and you tarry so long.
If either of you know any impediment why ye may not lawfully be joined together, in matrimony. Ye do now confess.
The marriage cannot go on. I declare the existence of an impediment. Mr. Chester has a wife now living at a Thornfield Hall. I saw her there last April, and I am her brother.
At Thornfield Hall? Impossible. Jane never heard of Mrs. Rochester at Thornfield Hall.
No, by God. I took care that none should hear of it, or of her under that name. Enough! I am little better than a devil at this moment. Gentlemen, my plan is broken up. Come all of you. Follow. You know this place, Mason? She bit and stabbed you here. That is my wife, whom I married 15 years ago. Bertha. Mason by name. She came of a mad family, idiots and maniacs, through 3 generations.
It was a discolored face. It was a savage face. The lips were swelled and dark, the brow furrowed, the black eyebrows widely raised over the bloodshot eyes.
Go to the devil.
Mr. Rochester and Bertha fight, with more hunting screeches, and she is subdued.
Such is the sole embrace I am ever to know, and this is what I wish to have? This young girl, who stands so grave and quiet at the mouth of hell, looking collectively at the gambols of a demon? Look at the difference, then judge me.
Priest clears Jane from all blame, then disappears into the night with Mr. Mason, leaving the lovebirds alone.
All is prepared for prompt departure. Tomorrow we shall go and be free of these terrors forever. I have a place to repair to, which will be our sanctuary.
If I could go out of life, no, without too sharp a pang, it would be well for me. I must leave you. It appears I do not want to leave you. I cannot leave you. But Mr. Rochester, I must leave you.
You will not come? You will not be my comforter, my rescuer? My deep love, my frantic prayer are all nothing to you? Oh, Jane, my hope, my love, my life. You don't love me then? It was only my station and the rank of my wife that you valued? Will you hear the reason, Jane? Because if you won't, I will try violence. But I am not angry, Jane. I only love you too well. After a youth passed in misery and solitude, I have for the first time found what I truly love. I have found you. You are my sympathy, my better self, my good angel. I think you good, gifted, lovely. I am bound to you. I was wrong to deceive you. I was cowardly.
He makes an effort to rest his head on her shoulder, but she won't permit it.
You see now how the case stands. Do you not? To say that I already have a wife is empty mockery. You know now that I have but a hideous
Sir,
demon.
you are inexorable for that unfortunate lady. You speak of her with hate, with vindictive antipathy. It is cruel. She cannot help being mad.
Jane, my little darling, you don't know what you're talking about. It is not because she is mad I hate her. If you were mad, do you think I should hate you?
I do, indeed, sir.